senior administrative clerk, Zephak stared at his holographic display with the kind of expression typically reserved for discovering someone had replaced your morning stimulant with decaf. The blue glow from the screen cast an unflattering light across his scaled features, making his already questionable mood even more apparent. "Incident report 20OT47B," he muttered, his voice carrying the bone-deep weariness of someone who had processed approximately 14,000 similar reports over the past cycle. "Classification review required. Priority level, what in the 7 moons?" The priority level blinked an alarming shade of crimson. In his 23 years of bureaucratic service aboard Station Nexus Prime, Zephak had seen maybe 3 reports with that designation. Usually they involved things like newly discovered species consumes entire star system, or time traveler accidentally prevents own birth. He leaned back in his ergonomically questionable chair, which squeaked in protest. The sterile walls of his office seemed to mock him with their bland efficiency. Motivational posters featuring various species declaring teamwork makes the dream work in 17 different languages did nothing to improve his disposition. "Let me get this straight," Zephak said to no one in particular, because talking to yourself was practically a job requirement in middle management. According to our official Galactic species database, humans are classified as Category 7, threat level minimal, primary diet, herbivorous, notable characteristics, excessive emotional displays and tendency to form inappropriate attachments to small furry creatures. He scrolled through the database entry, his secondary eyelids blinking in disbelief. The official description continued with gems like average lifespan embarrassingly short and combat effectiveness negligible, prefer conflict resolution through lengthy discussions about feelings. The report in front of him, however, painted a rather different picture. According to the submitted documentation, one human female, age 34, occupation listed as child care specialist, had somehow managed. Zephak paused, rereading the summary 3 times to make sure his translation matrix wasn't malfunctioning. Single-handedly defeated the 3 most feared apex predators in the known galaxy during the annual Predator Championship tournament, he read aloud, his voice rising to a pitch that would have been embarrassing if anyone else had been present. The coffee substitute in his mug had gone cold hours ago, but Zephak took a sip anyway, grimacing at the taste. This was going to require significantly more caffeine than his daily allowance permitted, and possibly several forms filed in triplicate. Zephak scrolled to the background section, where the true magnitude of this administrative nightmare began to unfold. The annual Apex Predator Championship, hosted on the neutral world of Carnage Prime, was exactly what it sounded like. Every cycle, the galaxy's most terrifying species gathered to settle the age-old question of who could rip whom apart most efficiently. Participants include the usual suspects, he muttered, scanning the list. The Krillian Death Dancers, the Shadow Rippers from the Void Sector, those charming fellows from the Bone Crusher dynasty. Each species name came with a footnote listing their preferred methods of dismemberment, which Zephak found deeply unnecessary but apparently required for insurance purposes. The tournament served multiple purposes, none of them particularly civilized. It prevented interspecies wars by channeling aggressive tendencies into organized violence, generated massive gambling revenue, and provided excellent material for reality horror shows with names like When Predators Attack, Extreme Edition. Then came the section that made Zephak's left eye twitch uncontrollably. Due to a clerical error in the invitation system, the report stated with the bland matter-of-factness that only true bureaucratic disasters could achieve, one representative from Earth's Sol system was inadvertently included in the participant roster. Zephak paused his reading to bang his head gently against his desk 3 times. It was a proven stress relief technique he had learned during his mandatory coping with administrative incompetence seminar. The human in question was one Jessica Chen, age 34, height 5 feet 6 inches, weight classified as average, occupation listed as kindergarten teacher. Her emergency contact was listed as mum, and her dietary restrictions included lactose intolerant and prefers organic vegetables. Zephak stared at this information for a full 30 seconds. Somewhere in the galaxy, a being whose job involved teaching small humans basic life skills had somehow ended up in an arena designed to showcase the most lethal creatures known to science. "This," he said to his empty coffee mug, "is going to be a very long day." The tournament footage began with what the commentators had enthusiastically labeled the David and Goliath moment of the century, though Zephak suspected they had gotten their human mythology slightly confused. The arena stretched before the cameras in all its blood-stained glory, with seats packed full of species that considered recreational violence a cultural art form. Jessica Chen entered from the left gate wearing what appeared to be standard-issue athletic clothing and sneakers that looked suspiciously like they came from a discount retailer. Her opponent, Kromax the Bone Crusher, emerged from the right gate with all the theatrical flair his species was famous for. Kromax stood 8 feet tall on his hind legs, his reptilian hide scarred from countless battles, each mark telling a story of something else he had probably eaten. His roar shook the arena's foundations, and caused several spectators in the front rows to reassess their life insurance policies. "Witness my might, tiny mammal," Kromax bellowed, his voice carrying the kind of menace that typically made grown warriors reconsider their career choices. "I have crushed the bones of 1,000 enemies. I have feasted on the marrow of champions. I am death incarnate." The cameras zoomed in on Jessica's face, clearly expecting to capture the moment of primal terror that usually preceded someone becoming Kromax's afternoon snack. Instead, they caught her checking her watch. "Oh wow," she said in a tone typically reserved for mildly interesting weather observations. "That's quite a speech. Do you rehearse that, or is it more of an improvisational thing?" Kromax paused mid-roar, his massive jaw hanging open. In 3 centuries of gladiatorial combat, no one had ever critiqued his intimidation technique. "Why? What?" he stammered, suddenly sounding less like death incarnate and more like someone who had forgotten their lines in a school play. "The whole death incarnate bit," Jessica continued, casually adjusting her ponytail with the kind of practiced efficiency that spoke of years dealing with energetic 5-year-olds. "It's very dramatic. I teach kindergarten, so I appreciate good performance art." The arena fell silent except for the sound of Kromax's confused breathing, and what might have been someone in the audience choking on their beverage. "You teach small humans?" Kromax asked, his threatening posture wilting like a flower in direct sunlight. 23 of them, actually, and let me tell you they're way scarier than you when they miss nap time." What followed could only be described as the most anticlimactic defeat in tournament history. Kromax, apparently suffering from an existential crisis about his life choices, simply sat down in the middle of the arena and began questioning whether he had been too hasty in choosing violence as a career path. Jessica patted him gently on his massive shoulder and suggested he consider anger management classes. Zephak paused the footage to refill his coffee substitute, a decision he immediately regretted when he resumed playback and nearly choked on the first sip. If Kromax had been the warm-up act, then Jessica's second opponent was the main event that nightmares paid premium tickets to watch. Grimlock the Shadow Ripper materialized from the arena's shadows like a living embodiment of every childhood fear, rolled into one supremely unpleasant package. His species hailed from Torment Prime, a world where the local wildlife included things with names like Soul Shredders and Hope Devourers, and even they gave Grimlock a wide berth. Unlike Kromax's theatrical approach, Grimlock preferred psychological warfare. He began by whispering Jessica's personal information in a voice that sounded like gravel being processed through a broken disposal unit. "Jessica Chen, born on Earth, year 2340, daughter of Margaret and Robert. You fear disappointment more than death. You worry about your students when you're not with them. You lie awake at night wondering if you're making a difference in their lives." The arena fell silent. This was Grimlock's signature move, the technique that had broken the minds of dozens of warriors before the physical battle even began. He could sense fear, doubt, and insecurity from across star systems. Jessica tilted her head, considering this. "Okay, first of all, how did you get my personal information? Because if you hacked my social media, I have to tell you, most of that stuff is just cat videos and complaints about coffee shop prices." Grimlock's shadowy form flickered with confusion. "I peer into your soul, mortal. I see your deepest fears." "Oh, well, that's invasive," Jessica replied, casually dodging a shadow tentacle that could have removed her head. "And honestly, pretty rude. I mean, we just met. Usually people start with hello or nice weather we're having." What followed was less a battle and more like watching someone navigate a particularly dangerous obstacle course while providing running commentary for a travel blog. Jessica used the arena's environment in ways that would have impressed a kindergarten playground supervisor, turning support beams into jungle gyms and using scattered debris as impromptu shields. "You know what your problem is?" she said, sliding under another attack while checking her phone for messages. "You're trying too hard. Fear is like dealing with tantruming 5-year-olds. The more dramatic you get, the less effective you become." Grimlock, master of 13 different forms of psychological torture, found himself completely unprepared for someone who treated his ultimate techniques like minor inconveniences. His shadow form began to waver as Jessica continued her casual deconstruction of his entire worldview. "And another thing," she added, using a broken pillar to vault over his reaching claws, "this whole fear me I am darkness routine. Very 2019. Have you considered maybe taking up pottery? I hear it's quite therapeutic." By the time the match ended, Grimlock was curled in a corner questioning everything he thought he knew about intimidation, while the crowd sat in stunned silence, unsure whether they had witnessed the greatest upset in tournament history or a very strange therapy session. Zephak's third cup of coffee substitute had gone cold while he watched the final match build up, and frankly he was considering switching to something stronger. The tournament organizers had pulled out every dramatic stop for the championship round, complete with pyrotechnics that could be seen from orbit, and an announcer whose enthusiasm bordered on the medically concerning. Zephak Prime entered the arena to the kind of reception typically reserved for natural disasters. 3-time defending champion, undefeated in 47 matches, and holder of the dubious honor of being the only competitor to literally consume his opponents mid-battle. His species classified eating their enemies as both victory condition and post-match snack. The creature stood 12 feet tall, covered in armored scales that had deflected everything from plasma cannons to small asteroids. His trophy collection included the preserved heads of every previous tournament winner going back 15 years. When he roared, seismic sensors 3 systems away registered minor tremors. Jessica, meanwhile, was having what appeared to be a perfectly normal pre-match routine. She checked her phone for text messages, scrolled through what looked like social media updates, and responded to what were probably emails from concerned parents about upcoming field trips. "Is she seriously checking her schedule right now?" Zephak muttered, zooming in on the footage. Indeed, Jessica appeared to be confirming her weekend plans while standing 20 feet from something that had once eaten a small moon. The crowd's anticipation reached fever pitch as the 2 opponents approached the center of the arena. This was the moment everyone had paid to see the ultimate predator facing off against the impossible anomaly who had somehow made it this far. Zephak Prime drew himself up to his full height, spread his wings to block out the arena lights, and released a roar that shattered several viewing screens and caused a brief power outage in the upper sections. The sound contained frequencies designed to trigger primal fear responses in every known species. Then he lowered his massive head until his fanged maw was inches from Jessica's face, close enough that his breath ruffled her hair, and unleashed his signature intimidation roar directly at her. Jessica calmly reached up, adjusted her ponytail with the practiced motion of someone who had done this exact thing approximately 10,000 times before, looked the 3-time champion of galactic violence directly in his ancient terrifying eyes, and said in the tone typically reserved for dealing with particularly silly children, "Is that it?" The arena fell so silent that the sound of Jessica's phone buzzing with a text message echoed like thunder. Zephak Prime, whose roar had made entire star systems surrender without firing a shot, stood frozen in complete bewilderment. "I mean," Jessica continued conversationally, "my kids make louder noises when I tell them it's quiet time." What happened next could only be described as a complete psychological collapse of a being who had spent 3 centuries believing he was the apex of evolutionary terror. Zephak Prime sat down heavily, his massive form creating a small crater, and began what could only be described as an existential breakdown. But I am the nightmare of nightmares, he whimpered, his voice now resembling a confused child rather than the harbinger of doom. Entire civilizations flee at the mention of my name. That sounds exhausting, Jessica replied, patting his armored snout sympathetically. Have you considered a career change? Maybe something in customer service? Zephak paused the footage and leaned back in his chair, finally understanding the magnitude of what he was witnessing. Humans weren't harmless herbivores, they were something far more terrifying, a species so utterly unimpressed by violence that they could accidentally defeat the galaxy's most feared predators through sheer emotional resilience and what appeared to be advanced sarcasm techniques. The post-match interview sealed his growing horror. Jessica, crowned as the new Apex Predator champion, spent the entire ceremony worrying about whether she would make it home in time for dinner and asking if anyone knew a good recipe for casserole that could feed 24 people. I really should get going, she told the interviewer, checking her watch while holding a trophy made from the crystallized remains of previous champions. I promised my class we'd have show and tell tomorrow, and I haven't prepared anything yet. Though I suppose this might work. The implications were staggering. If one human kindergarten teacher could accidentally traumatize the galaxy's most dangerous predators, what would happen if humans actually tried to be threatening? Zephak shuddered at the thought and began drafting his recommendation for immediate species reclassification. Zephak stared at his completed report for a full 10 minutes, contemplating the administrative avalanche it would trigger. Reclassifying an entire species required forms 4A through 8047Z, committee reviews, subcommittee reviews, and at least 3 interdepartmental meetings where everyone would argue about proper threat assessment protocols. The paperwork alone would take 17 years to process. The committee hearings would require translators for 43 different languages. Someone would inevitably demand a cost-benefit analysis of galactic panic versus filing efficiency. With the careful deliberation of someone who had survived 2 decades in bureaucratic trenches, Zephak selected the report file and dragged it slowly toward the deletion folder. His finger hovered over the confirmation button for exactly 3 seconds before clicking. Oops, he said to his empty office. System glitch. These things happen. Somewhere in the Sol system, Jessica Chen was teaching 23 5-year-olds about sharing and proper nap time behavior, completely unaware that she remained officially classified as a harmless herbivore who posed no threat to galactic security whatsoever. Zephak poured himself a fresh cup of coffee substitute and moved on to the next report. Some secrets were too dangerous for proper filing procedures.